All right, and I'm going to pass it to Morgan to open us up, and then I'm going to go through the agenda review, and then we'll get started.
Thank you so much, Catherine, and hi, everyone. It's so nice to see everybody's faces and everybody in the list of attendees, a lot of familiar names. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. For those of you who don't know, I'm Morgan Monaco. I'm the relatively new executive director here at the Red Hook Initiative. And if you don't know, we are almost 20 years strong in the community, supporting youth development and community building, and are happy to be a convener for a really important topic affecting the neighborhood. We are excited to be joined by a number of panelists and subject matter experts to share their experience of what they know. Tonight is really about information sharing. It's about learning, about talking about what are the unknowns. There are many unanswered questions that we have, that we know others in the community have. And we really wanted to create a space and an opportunity to share this information out specifically with Red Hook Houses residents and talk about the impact that they may experience and what they want to see from this group. So I'm really grateful for, again, everybody making the time for this, for coming together. I know there's a number of competing priorities, including a mayoral debate happening shortly. So thank you for tuning in to join us for this important conversation. This is just the beginning. Again, we're sharing what we know, and we look forward to future events where we can continue to build on shared knowledge about what is happening, how it impacts, and what everybody wants to do about that. So I want to give also a special thank you to Catherine and the community building team for all of their work for putting tonight's event together, and to my fellow panelists for making the time and for sharing your thoughts with us. So Catherine, I pass it back to you.
Thank you. Great. So I'm going to give a quick overview of the agenda, and then Dan and I are going to open it up with some broad information to get us going. The agenda is going to talk about last mile delivery centers in general. So we're going to hear from Allison, who's joined us, who's going to share about kind of like the national scale of these centers, what's happening nationwide. We're going to hear about the state, New York, or the city, New York City specifically, kind of how these last mile delivery centers, Amazon specifically, have rolled out. And then we're going to hear from Resilient Red Hook about the local context of these centers and what we're seeing and what some of the concerns are. We're then going to hear about an environmental justice perspective on this issue from Karen Blondell, who's joining us. And then lastly, we'll hear from a lot of our elected officials. And so we have Jenny from the Assembly Member's Office. We have Dan from the Congresswoman's Office. We'll have Carlos Menchaca joining us. And we also have representatives from Community Board 6. And then after that, we'll have 45 minutes of question and answer discussion, and people will be able to unmute and chime in. So Dan, I'm gonna stay unmuted so I could join you, but I'm gonna pass it to you.
Oh, okay. Thanks. I thought we'd start off with a video. I have a map of last mile distribution facilities, but there's a pretty dramatic video that is promotional, but really a call to be concerned. So I'm just going to play this, see if it works. Let me know if it works.
I don't think we can hear the audio. Just make sure when you hit share screen, you hit share audio as well.
Oh, the audio isn't working?
Yeah, it's okay.
Wait, share audio. Where's that? So no one heard audio on that?
It's okay, we're forgiving. We're a forgiving audience.
Share sound.
Share sound, yeah.
Okay, just nod, Catherine, if you hear this.
Have exceeded the capacity of the network.
You're in a situation where there's just not enough space right now for all the e-commerce and for all the shipping that has to be done.
Okay, so I'm now you might notice this is a promotional video for 640 Columbia Street, which is one of the many sites in Red Hook being developed for Last Mile Logistics Center. This particular one for Amazon, and I also note that all the workers seem to be white, as well as having bad jobs, will get fired pretty quickly. If you read the New York Times expose today. I'm going to share next just a quick map that summarizes the sites right here. And okay, so this map shows the sites. I'll try to make it bigger. Full screen mode, there it is. So the site we were just looking at is 640 Columbia Street. And this is a map that Renee Widdowson put together last Thanksgiving with all of the last mile delivery logistics centers that were proposed or possible in Red Hook and Sunset Park in Carlos Menchaca's 38 Council District, includes both of our districts. So right in the middle, you'll see there Amazon AMZL, 397 square feet, which is, if you total up that video that showed you all those different floors and square footages, if you add them up, including the parking, that's what it comes out to. The black numbers under 640 Columbia shows the zoning and the lot square footage in black. And then below that, Q4 2022 is an updated launch expectation that Amazon has to launch and make the site operational. Although they say that they wouldn't do it, at the end of the year, but probably be right after that. So that was pushed back a little bit. If you take a look at these photographs, Catherine ran out there and took a picture of 640 Columbia Street. It's in the lower right-hand quadrant near the Red Hook Farm. And the one on the upper left is the UPS site, which this is just a rendering of what the facade could look like, keeping some of the historic structure that they were tearing down that we were able to get them to not fully tear down. And that's on the upper left here. And if you look down on the chart on the bottom, this chart has all the development sites listed with the lot area column, and then the developable area, how much they could develop as of right, which means that they could develop that many square feet without any zoning changes or special permits. And these logistics centers are allowed as of right in manufacturing zones. So 280 Richards is the first one here. That's the one on the other side of IKEA. And here on the lower left, you can see the facade starting to go up on Beard Street. And that's at the end of Richard Street where it runs into Beard. So basically you have two Amazon facilities that's flanking the IKEA site. And then you have UPS closer to Atlantic Basin. And then if you go further toward the Gowanus Canal, you have the Buckeye Terminal, which is a question mark how that's going to be developed. And if you go up Columbia Street, you have Amazon Fresh, which is not quite the same as the other two Amazons that are on either side of IKEA that are called AMZL. But those are standard intermediary sites to deliver packages coming from their fulfillment warehouse in Staten Island called JFK 8. And it's called JFK 8 for no good reason, except that it's close to JFK and they do have an air hub at JFK, but a lot of stuff comes in on 18-wheelers. And from that video, you could see they showed coming from Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania, coming from up the New Jersey Turnpike. They saw ships coming in too, but I don't think they're necessarily bringing in stuff by ships. That was a promotional video that then Amazon jumped on to become the leasee for this site that Dove Hertz put together. So the developer of the Columbia Street site and also the FedEx site on Sunset Park waterfront on the other side of Gowanus Bay is Dove Hertz also. And Dove Hertz is also developing the Amazon Fresh, which is just up Columbia Street at Bay Street. And then Thor Equities is developing the Amazon site here on the lower left where you see the facade going up. There was going to be a lot of different things as we recall. So that's just an overview. Catherine, go ahead and take it away. I think there's labor issues and there's transportation, pedestrian safety, environmental justice, and I know we're going to get into all that. But that kind of sets the stage. I figure to end with this nice picture of the farm and the Amazon site looming in the background.
Yes, shout out to the farm. Sorry, you could put in the chat when the farmer's market is starting. I believe it's this Saturday. Thank you, Dan. Lots to consider with these sites. So we're going to go right into it. We're going to start with kind of the big picture and then narrow in. So I'm going to hand it over to Allison Felix. And Allison is a transportation planner from Metropolitan Area Planning Council in Boston and was part of producing a really impressive report called Hidden in Plain Sight, which I'm going to share in the chat. So Allison, thank you.
Great. 1 second, I'm just trying to get to my full screen. 1 moment. Oh.
No worries, take your time. And for
Thanks.
everyone who hasn't signed in, please sign in. I just put the sign-in sheet in the chat.
Sorry, 1 second.
And just for the panelists, I'm going to be timing you and I will interrupt you when you have 2 minutes left. I'll give you a signal and then I'll let you know when your time's up so we can move it into Q&A in time.
Allison, if you go up
Yeah.
just a little bit, there's the present button. Go up. Left.
Oh, right
There you go.
here. Thank you. So can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we see it.
Oh, great. So again, thank you, Christine or Catherine. My name is Allison Felix, and I am a senior transportation planner with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, or MAPC. MAPC is the regional planning agency serving the people who live and work in the 101 cities and towns of metropolitan Boston. And MAPC's mission is to promote smart growth and regional collaboration. So about 4 months ago, MAPC released a report called Hidden and in Plain Sight: Impacts of E-commerce in Massachusetts, to better understand how e-commerce impacts and affects our communities, and also to serve as a resource for municipalities and policy makers. This report concentrated on transportation and land use impacts, and the list on the left shows the chapters of our report. This evening, I'll cover 4 areas. The first is key findings regarding last mile warehouse facilities, how last mile warehouse facilities operate, next steps MAPC plans to undertake, and also recent legislation and a pilot project underway in California to manage e-commerce facilities. So what we learned from our research on this report is that consumers are increasingly expecting to receive the goods they purchase quickly, and retailers such as Amazon, Walmart, and Target are competing to reduce order fulfillment times by offering next day and even same day deliveries. And this pressure to maintain dependable and ever quicker delivery times has resulted in e-commerce companies adding warehouse and distribution centers closer to consumers as part of their regional networks. This is a significant industry trend which impacts both land use and transportation and is showing no signs of changing. So this competition to add warehouse and distribution centers closer to consumers has also resulted in a very high demand for industrial real estate. As an example, I'll take a closer look at Amazon, which is one of the largest tenants in the greater Boston industrial market and has plans for continued expansion. We, from our research, learned that at the beginning of the year, there were 20 Amazon facilities that were operating and 14 were in the pipeline in Massachusetts. The oldest of these facilities opened in 2014, but 10 became operational last year. So if all of these planned facilities do become operational, the total square footage could reach over 12 million square feet in the state, and this is just Amazon. Oops. Sorry. So the daily operations of a last mile warehouse typically begin with the arrival of tractor trailers that bring packages in bulk from fulfillment centers throughout the night, usually after 11. The items are sorted and prepped and then loaded into vans overnight for delivery. The deliveries vans depart from the warehouses starting in the late morning, make their deliveries during the day, and then return in the evening. In many cases, the departure of delivery vans is scheduled in waves. So as one wave of vans leaves the site, another is loaded. E-commerce companies like Amazon, Walmart, and Target also contract with third-party delivery service partners or DSPs to make deliveries. And when there is additional demand to deliver what cannot be accommodated by the vans, on-call drivers will be used to fulfill customer deliveries. On-call drivers usually arrive in the middle of the day and use their personal vehicles to make deliveries. Amazon's on-call driver program is called Amazon Flex, and Walmart has a similar program called Spark. So including tractor trailers, delivery vans, and on-call drivers, a typical facility can generate more than 1,000 vehicle trips each day, and most operate 24 hours per day. Deliveries from a last mile warehouse typically cover a 45-mile radius. Also, these facilities require large parking lots where employees can park their personal vehicles and the company can stage delivery vans. So MAPC's report outlines actionable steps for municipalities to consider should an e-commerce warehouse or distribution facility be proposed. Actionable steps include traffic mitigation and project monitoring. And all of the actionable steps on this slide have the collective goal of integrating warehouse and distribution centers with deliberate design, mitigation, and management. And it's also important to note here, there's not just one actionable step that needs to be taken, but rather several steps need to happen simultaneously. So for next steps, MAPC plans to develop an online playbook for municipalities so they can use this information to sustainably manage the impacts from the increasing number of e-commerce warehouse and distribution centers. Additional planned research efforts in this space include researching, monitoring, and evaluating delivery pilots underway and to determine their feasibility to potentially replicate in the MAPC region. And also conducting research on the online shopping habits of individuals and households to determine the extent to which online shopping either replaces or increases trips. MAPC is also following two undertakings in California. Last month, the South Coast Air Quality Management District approved a rule that would require warehouses to lower emissions from the trucks that serve the warehouses. This is referred to or known as the indirect source rule. This effort is unusual because it targets emissions from the trucks that service the warehouses rather than the warehouses themselves. Also, the indirect source rule relies on a points-based system in which warehouse operators can choose from a menu of options, like using electric or natural gas fueled trucks, installing charging stations, rooftop solar panels, or even putting in air filters in nearby schools or child care centers. Or warehouse operators can opt to pay a mitigation fee. And in February, the Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator and the City of Santa Monica partnered to deploy a voluntary zero emissions delivery zone. This zone is a 1 square mile area in Santa Monica that will use small electric vehicles for food and parcel deliveries. It's considered to be the first of its kind in the nation, and goals of the zero emissions delivery zone are to provide community benefits such as reduced air pollution, greenhouse gas emissions, noise and congestion, as well as improved safety, and also to provide a blueprint for cities to adopt zero emissions delivery zones. But closer to home, the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority has developed a goods movement strategies for communities tool, which is available for use. This is an online tool designed to help address questions and issues regarding moving goods by truck. Users can use this database to identify specific issues and then search a database of successful strategies. And finally, next week, the Regional Plan Association will be hosting a 2-day webinar on impacts and opportunities of e-commerce in the New York region, which also may be of interest. And this slide contains the web link to read more about the webinar and also to register. And with that, that's the conclusion of my presentation, and look forward to the conversation afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Allison. That was so much information. So we're going to keep going through, and then we're going to have Q&A at the end. So if you have questions for Allison, write them down. And I'm going to move us forward to the New York City view. And so I'm introducing Bex Allen and Jeremy Zimmerman, two amazing Columbia University students that we have been in contact with over the past few months. And they have been leading some research around this and are going to share out what they found. So I pass it over to you, Bex and Jeremy.
Yep, just getting, there we go. Okay, awesome. So first I want to thank Catherine and everyone here for inviting us virtually this evening into your community. As Catherine said, today me and Bex, who are students at Columbia, are going to be presenting, but I do want to acknowledge that this work was done with the help of other students at Columbia, Maria, Stephanie, and Andrew, who have all also just recently graduated from Columbia University. So I'll get more into it, but our research really focused on New York City as a whole, which obviously includes Red Hook, which is one of the major epicenters of a lot of these new warehouses, as Dan sort of discussed earlier. And this project was also done in conjunction with the Center for Resilient Cities and Landscapes, of which STAD, which many of you may know, is a part of. So to start, we just had a great overview from Allison about sort of how last mile warehouses work and what they are, and sort of e-commerce in a broader sense. And so what we really wanted to look at, since this is what is affecting a lot of the boroughs in New York, is the last mile warehouse, and particularly the problem with it. So the last mile warehouse is sort of that last step. It's a warehouse or center where goods are stored to be delivered within the next day or so for expedient online shopping. Sometimes this is next day delivery or 2-day express delivery, depending on the service. That's not always the last mile, it just is the expression that's often used. And with these, we sort of have two different sides of the problem. We have sort of the side where these facilities are being built. So this can be demonstrated with the delivery station in Queens on the left, and many of the other ones that are currently being built in Red Hook that you are all very familiar with. And it also presents a problem at the point of delivery, as can be seen in this picture in Manhattan, but also in many other areas in Brooklyn, where these packages are being delivered. It takes up large amounts of the street and can cause traffic and problems as well. And so our research looked a little bit at both, but primarily was looking at the actual last mile warehouses themselves and all of the issues that sort of come with that. And what we're really here to talk about are some of these tensions that are at play here. And I saw in the chat there were lots of questions about this, like, so what are the problems with this? What are some of the good things about this? And that's really where these tensions come into play. So we have sort of this tension of what academics like to call sustainable development, which is this tension between the environmental good, the economic good, and the social good. And so we can see that at play here, especially in the way lots of companies frame it as an economic and sometimes even social good in providing a service. And this service has been very essential since COVID-19 has started, with a lot of people needing to stay home, and especially the elderly. It has provided a very important social and economic good. At the same time, it has negatively impacted the environment by increasing the number of diesel vehicles on the streets and trucks, and also potentially has negative economic and social environments by disrupting neighborhoods and disrupting local economies and local shops, which we'll get more into later. So that's one tension that's at play. And then the second tension that's at play is really one that's especially present in New York. And this is because of sort of the need for last mile warehouses to be as close to the urban center as possible. But as many of you may know, there's not a lot of land in downtown Manhattan that can sort of just be turned into a warehouse. There's not really land anywhere in New York for that. But this sort of forces it to be in the same areas in the periphery. So this tends to impact the same neighborhoods again and again and again. And this is where we get to sort of environmental justice issues. And this is really getting into the fact that areas are facing the burden of having all of these warehouses more so than other areas. And we're going to talk more about this later, but these are the two frameworks that we're kind of taking into this presentation. So now I want to take the time to build off of what Allison did and talk about some of the broader issues that the country has faced with this, and really talk about some of the specifics in New York City that make this problem especially challenging. The first and biggest one that we ran into is with the zoning in New York City, and particularly the way city planning works, which has a lack of a comprehensive plan. So a comprehensive plan is a technical term that most cities and towns in the United States have. It's a plan to sort of build out the city or the town. And in most towns and cities across the United States, a local zoning board has to approve anything new that is built. New York City does not have this. There is not a comprehensive plan. There's not really a clear set path for it. There's just sort of these zones. And if the building matches the purpose of the zone, it can just go right ahead. There doesn't need to be any sort of special permitting. There doesn't need to be any community board oversight. And this is where the problems start to occur. In addition, we have this lack of a warehouse definition. And this is really important. This is really concerning to us when we sort of, talked with people from city planning and talked with people in the city government. They sort of said, we don't have a definition for warehouse or last mile warehouse. They just sort of see it as any sort of storage facility, no different than a barn that might store some goods, or a light bulb storage facility was the phrase that they used. And so that's kind of concerning to us, because I think we all can recognize these are different facilities with different impacts on the community. And these two things together really create a lot of the issues that's the foundation of why these issues are happening, is because we're having building as of right. So as of right, as I said, is just sort of building that doesn't need the local community oversight. It doesn't really need any oversight as long as it fits the pre-established rules. And this can be especially troubling when we have such new facilities such as the warehouses. And there could be potential goods from this, but without the ability for the local community to have a say, it can create problems. And as Dan showed us earlier, all of these facilities going into Red Hook are in manufacturing districts, so they don't need to have any oversight, which is very concerning. And just to say, this is not an issue just in Red Hook, so this is a similar issue in the Bronx. As you can see, they have similar facilities being built that already exist, and they have similar issues with trucks, and we're gonna get more into that later too. And so from this tension and from this problem, our main question really became, how can the problems of last mile warehouses be mitigating while acknowledging the increased consumer dependence on e-commerce in our society? So this graph shows in the last 5 years, the increase in just Amazon last mile warehouses in New York City. And as you can see, it's exponentially increased, which shows that there's a big demand for this. And we need that demand needs to be acknowledged because you can't just wish these away. And so in order to do this, we looked at literature, we looked at spatial analysis through mapping, and we also conducted a lot of interviews with community members, with city planners, with people in the city government, to really just try to understand what is going on with this issue in the city, because there hasn't been the same sort of planning that's been done in, say, Massachusetts, like Allison said, or in California. So we really needed to figure out, like, so what is going on? And so this is what's going on. The buildings themselves. As many of you are probably aware, there's been a lot of destruction of historic neighborhoods because of this. Historic warehouses that have been around since the 1800s are being destroyed, especially in Red Hook, in order to make way for these new facilities. And since they're the same, since they're also warehouses just as these are, even though they look nothing alike and don't function at all in the same way, they're just allowed to be built. We also have a loss of traditional shopping. These facilities are being done with online shopping. There's no storefront component to this. And so there's not the same sort of energy of promoting a local economy that you would have from a normal warehouse. We also find few and low paying jobs. Amazon, the majority of these jobs are done either through an assembly line, and they're even planning on rolling out a robot-based workforce. And so there are a few jobs, and the ones that do exist, especially compared to the cost of living in a major city, are low paying. And importantly, lower paying than the places that were there before. And we also see increased noise and air pollution from the buildings themselves, and an overall decreased quality of life reported by people who now live near these facilities across the city and across the country. And then we also have impacts from the trucks and transportation, and this is where a lot of people like to talk about because it's very noticeable. So we have increased air pollution. So yes, we have the air pollution that contributes to greenhouse gases, that contributes to global warming, but we also have the air pollution that is called PM 2.5, which is just small particles in general that get into our lungs and hurt us as humans, and can lead to increased health risks for a variety of issues. And that's especially concerning with the significant increase of trucks that a lot of these facilities bring. We also, as many people in the chat have mentioned, have increased traffic concerns at the warehouse, at the point of delivery, and everywhere in between. So just because the warehouse might not be where you are, if you live a few blocks down and that's where the truck has to go, you're going to face these impacts. So it's really affecting the whole city and not just the site where the buildings are being built. We also have increased safety concerns. A lot of these trucking routes are right near playgrounds and parks. And we have concerns, especially with kids and these trucks going down streets. We also have concerns of noise pollution, as mentioned, from the facility and also the trucks themselves. They can be incredibly noisy and they can vibrate, especially historic buildings that are present in places such as Red Hook. So now Bex is going to take over and talk more about some of the trends across the city based off of what I said more specifically.
Hi everyone, I'm Bex, and just to reiterate, thank you so much for having us both. I'm happy that we're able to talk to you and get this information out there. So we used Amazon as a case study for the last mile issue across the city. And this first map just shows all of Amazon locations in New York. And in the pink, you can see are the last mile delivery stations for small packages. And this is, first of all, the most common facility that Amazon has. That's the first thing I want to draw your attention to. And the second thing I want to point out is that all of the lines are truck routes, and all of the facilities are located in close proximity to these truck routes, which I think really is important to note right now because it makes it especially important to find safe locations for these designated routes to be. Next slide, please. And this next map shows Amazon facilities that opened as of 2020 and then are planned to open in 2021 and 2022. And I wanted to draw your attention to this because this is a majority of the facilities that Amazon operates. It's a very emerging issue. And in white, you can see the facilities that opened in 2020. In light blue, the facilities that opened in 2021. And the dark blue are facilities that are planned to open in 2022, which include both of the locations in red. I created this map to kind of visualize how new this issue is. Amazon has more than doubled its last mile facilities since 2020. So this really emphasizes the urgency of addressing the problems that these facilities create. Next slide, please. This map overlays the locations of Amazon facilities on top of the city's opportunity zones, which are areas created by the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act to incentivize investment in designated communities. I wanted to draw your attention to the prevalence of Amazon in the opportunity zones because it indicates, first, that there's an unequal distribution of Amazon facilities across the city. And second, that Amazon's potential use of government subsidies could show that they're operating under some guise of benefiting the neighborhood, because that is kind of what the opportunity zones were created to do. So I think Amazon's prevalence in these areas should definitely raise alarms as to potentially if they're getting government money to operate these facilities. Next slide, please. So the majority of our analysis was traffic hotspot analysis using GIS. And I used traffic data from the Department of Transportation to look at whether Amazon's last mile warehouses seek out areas with high traffic or create traffic or both. And what I found ultimately was that it seems Amazon both locates last mile facilities in areas that are already highly trafficked and further exacerbates these issues by creating then areas that are very heavy in traffic congestion. So all of the next couple of maps are going to show you each year that Amazon opened a facility and also the traffic hotspots for those years. So next slide, please. This is 2015 when Amazon opened its first and only last mile warehouse in Manhattan. That same year, as you can see in red, that same location was where the most traffic was congested in the city. Next slide, please. In 2016, Amazon opened a last mile warehouse in Long Island. And as you can see again, the pattern of traffic congestion shifted east toward the location of the warehouse. Next slide, please. In 2017, Amazon didn't open any last mile warehouses, but I just want to point to traffic congestion patterns in Queens and the South Bronx significantly increased because both of these areas are locations that later on Amazon opens last mile warehouses in. Next slide, please. Thank you. In 2018, Amazon opened 3 last mile warehouses, the most of any year up to that point. And the location in Queens, like I had said, is an area that the year before was a heavy traffic hotspot. And the other 2 locations are near hotspots for 2018. Next slide, please. In 2019, Amazon opened 1 warehouse in Hunts Point, an area that had frequently been a site for traffic congestion this year and the years before. And I just want to also point out that several of the other areas that this year were traffic hotspots are locations that at that point, Amazon had already had open last mile warehouses. And next slide, please. I brought up the truck routes before because I think that this is a particular issue that Red Hook is facing, because all of the health impacts of trucks and potential impact from PM 2.5 and the environment are issues that all of the communities that are faced with this issue are going to have to address. But I think that one issue in particular that Red Hook is facing is the location of its truck routes. Like I said before, the truck routes are especially important because Amazon is going to have a lot of trucks coming in when the 2022 facilities open. And this truck route in Red Hook runs right through the Red Hook Park. So I think this is a particularly dangerous location for this route. And this is something that Red Hook in particular is going to have to address in addition to the health and safety concerns posed by trucks in terms of the environment.
Yeah, so as we sort of talked about, we can see that last mile warehouses present sort of some unique challenges that we talked about, such as the unloading in streets and, just I think the aesthetics are not as nice as other previous tenants of a lot of those buildings. But importantly, they exacerbate existing challenges. So you can see these facilities are being put in areas that are already under strain of traffic, including Red Hook, which historically is a hotspot for traffic in the city. And I think the biggest takeaway that you can see from the maps is that burdens are not being shared equally. You can clearly see a ring of warehouses around Manhattan, particularly in neighborhoods that are historically underserved and neighborhoods that historically have higher traffic to start with. And so it really shows that burdens are not being shared equally across the city, which brings up the issues of environmental justice, and that last mile warehouses create new challenges that need to be addressed by the community and by the city government. And sort of to wrap everything up, Thad created some fun graphics that I think he's gonna explain to you now.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. Thanks, Bex. Great job. This is just a quick visual summary. I learned so much from these students that did research in my own words too, that this really has appeared as a major citywide issue. It's a regional issue, it's a national issue. While we've all been home quarantining, e-commerce has exploded. Jeff Bezos has gone from $75 billion of net worth to $180 billion. And the issues are, yeah, it's trucks, it's the emissions, it's the pollution, but it's also impact on local businesses, the loss of this industrial land that should otherwise be providing good jobs, especially as we look toward a just transition, and the disproportionate impact on communities of color. And Jeremy, can you go to the next slide? I think we have a rapidly narrowing window of opportunity to do something about this from a citywide perspective. I'm not sure what, but just some initial thoughts is that there should be some regulation here. And Jim will talk, I think, about maritime freight. That seems like it could be part of it. District delivery systems, I think Allison mentioned this, it's happening in Europe where we reduce truck trips by making local centers in our neighborhoods where people can pick stuff up. Used to be called post offices, but now they're called district delivery centers. Electric vehicles, for sure, just sustainable and resilient site design. And we should ask these warehouses as they're being built to support local businesses, either with free incubator space or other kinds of direct subsidies. And most of all, allow and support unionization, local hiring, and workforce training. So that's just a few initial thoughts from me, but thanks for the great summary, everyone, and turning it back to you, Catherine.
Thank you, Thad. Thank you for being here. All right, we're going to move it along. So we're going to move into local Red Hook, and I'm going to pass it off to Jim Tampakis and Hildegard Link from Resilient Red Hook.
Unmute.
Okay, Jim, do you want me to share the screen and you do the talking? You talk.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. I just want to say a couple of things even before you start with the screen. You could start your screen stuff. So with what Allison and Jeremy and Bex said earlier, so they're up. New York City is up to 2.4 million packages per day doing deliveries in the boroughs of New York City. One of the other things I just wanted to clarify is that a lot of times I'm listening to people saying that, how do they bring in all of this freight? Do they bring it in is it coming from JFK? Is it coming from via water? I mean, just if you think about it logically, so when you have shipments coming in from the Far East, you have, a container that could hold 40,000 pounds. That's going to cost $5,000 to $6,000. And then you can have an air freight shipment, which is going to cost about $1.50 a pound. as well. So you're talking about 5,000 to 6,000 for a container of 40,000 pounds, or $1.50 times 40,000 pounds is going to be 60,000. So it's going to be 10 times as much to bring in the freight via air as opposed to the water. And that's why obviously water makes a better sense of bringing in all their freight, just as long as it's not something that's in a hurry, like PPE equipment, like those light masks that they were bringing in the past. So
Go ahead.
So
it's arguing with me, so go ahead.
okay, so basically we're just going to run through our presentation quickly regarding Red Hook. You can go to the next slide. So basically, again, we just want to bring to everybody's attention on what's going on. Just as Beck showed us the map, go to the next map. So this is, I'm sorry, go back one.
There you go.
So this is basically our map that is indicating all the warehouses are being built either a block away or right on the water, and they're on the most southern part of Red Hook. So basically, you need to go through the neighborhood in order to go to these particular facilities. You can go to the next. So we have a total of approximately 3 million square feet of space that's coming in. In speaking with the professors from Rensselaer Poly Institute, we were talking about Hunts Point is presently, who has a 400,000 square foot facility, is bringing in 15,000 trucks a day in and out of the Hunts Point facility in the Bronx. Red Hook is going to have close to 3 million square feet. What does that mean? It means that we're going to have potentially a lot of vehicles coming in and out of the neighborhood. So, you know, like you guys just said. So let's go to the next slide. So basically, these warehouses, as they were shown on that first video that we saw, there a lot of the floors are 28-foot ceiling heights. Amazon, between the two sites, has approximately 18.2 million cubic feet. If you do some math and then you look and you figure out, go to the next slide.
Sure.
If you do the math, it comes out to, you know, we're going to have 18.2 million cubic feet. Each truck is going to be 2,000 cubic feet approximately, which is 9,100 trucks in order to load the facilities. And the question is always, how many times are they looking to turn these facilities over on a daily basis, or on a weekly basis or monthly basis, or whatever the case is? The other issue is that we have is with these Sprinter vans that they're using. If you do a mathematical equation again and you figure out how many cubic feet fit in a Sprinter van, in order to empty out those two warehouses, it comes out to 86,000 cubic feet, 86,000, I'm sorry, Sprinter vans in order to empty out these warehouses again. So continue on. So, which was interesting in the video, as Allison mentioned from Resilient Red Hook, they were showing 53 footers bringing in all the freight. And we know that 53 footers aren't allowed to come into the city. So that's going to be an interesting situation. And another thing that was brought up was that if you looked at each one of those floors on that video, spend some time, go to Vimeo, go to 640columbia.com and look at the Vimeo video and look at how many people are employed in these facilities. They showed 3 people, 5 people on each floor, you know, in the staging areas, which is, again, they're pushing jobs, but there's no jobs really there because everything is automated. Continue. So,
You want me to take this, Jim?
yeah, sure, you can.
So we may not be able to stop the warehouses, but we can demand that they be good neighbors. We can demand that goods delivery does not destroy the physical and relational fabric of the neighborhood. Brooklyn Community Board 6 has succeeded in making demands of companies wanting to do business in Red Hook and Gowanus. When IKEA came to Red Hook, Brooklyn CB6 demanded and got buses, ferries, and parking. So Red Hook streets would not be clogged with shoppers. And so the added transportation would help a transportation challenged neighborhood. CB6 demanded and got park space that honored the marine history of the neighborhood. So what we'd like for all of us to do here is imagine what we want for our precious Red Hook. We can change up goods and transport delivery modes and look for marine transport, bicycle transport, electric vehicles. We can demand that truck routes bypass residential and local business areas. Here are some ideas. We can demand that all large-scale deliveries of goods arrive by water. We can demand that last-mile warehouses provide seed money for key neighborhood amenities. We can demand that warehouse entities, not just Amazon, pay for upgrades to the Red Hook Health Center. We can demand that they include community solar on their roofs and support community solar around the neighborhood. We can demand that warehouse companies build charging stations around the neighborhood and specifically in their facilities. We can demand that last mile warehouse facilities pay for street reconstruction and store management upgrades that will necessarily fail when this huge volume of trucks begins to pound the streets. We can demand that all jobs go to our Red Hook neighbors. What else? What else do we want? What is it we want for our one wild and precious Red Hook? What are your ideas? So here in the email, in the slide, you see the Resilient Red Hook email address. Please send thoughts and ideas to this email. We will continue to meet in Red Hook with Community Board 6 and over time with Community Board 7, who faces similar concerns in their neighborhood. And we want our neighbors' ideas to come first. So please reach out and send us thoughts and ideas so that we make sure that your thoughts and ideas come out into the discussion. Thanks so much. And
Awesome.
talk to us. We can't wait.
I want to just say
Thank you.
a couple of more
Okay.
quick closing things
Okay,
that are
1
very
minute.
positive. So on last Friday, the Red Hook Marine Terminal conducted the first test run of a cross harbor trailer situation on barges for a ro-ro service. So there's efforts to start bringing in freight from New Jersey on roll-on, roll-off barges where they'll be able to have them just come across the harbor into the Red Hook Marine Terminal and get unloaded. And then from the Red Hook Marine Terminal through the piers, they would go directly to the UPS site, which is fantastic. So we don't have them coming down Van Brunt Street. And then they're also looking to do the same type of situation with Hughes, which is at the foot of Columbia Street. So that is another ideal situation where if they were unloading these barges with the containers, again, ro-ro into the facilities on Columbia and just brought around the block and brought over to the two IKEA, not the two IKEA sites, on both sides of IKEA, the two Amazon sites, it would reduce the traffic, the pollution, just the thought of having all of my fellow neighbors on Van Brun Street when they're telling me that at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, that when these tractor trailers come rolling down Van Brun Street and all their houses, it's like an earthquake. And now we're talking about having this, you know, Amazon, you mentioned, starts at midnight until 5 in the morning, is kind of sickening. So anyway, in that, I'll just leave it. Just wanted to give a couple extra little things there.
I'm trying to show you a picture of the, sorry.
I think we should move on. I'm so sorry to do this, but we have a lot we want to get in. And I will say, my organizer self says we can block Amazon. And I have seen Red Hook do what seemed impossible before. So gotta call that out. And I am really happy to introduce Karen Blondell, who many of you know, Red Hook resident environmental justice organizer and Harvard Loeb Fellow. So Karen, I will pass to you. When I can share screen for you.
Thank you, Catherine. I don't even think I need to share screen. But I do want to make a few comments about the existing truck route. I absolutely don't think Van Brunt can handle the amount of truck traffic that they're talking about. I absolutely was upset that as of right, we didn't hear about this soon enough to discuss this. So for that, you know, any city council president, any city council member coming in, we need to set the footprint up real quick that we don't care if something's as of right in Red Hook. If something's new coming here, we want to know, because as of right between 1917 and 1970 is not the same as of right in 2020. There are a lot of people that live here, and while that route doesn't work on Van Brunt, we will not accept the route on Columbia Street either. And what I see is trucks coming through Columbia Street. So you can show them the screen now. I was just taking pictures of just the regular truck traffic that has started to pick up in Red Hook because of resiliency processes, the Sandy recovery work that's being done by the Red Hook houses, and also work that's going to be coming in soon from DDC for the coastal resiliency process. But remember, I also work in the next neighborhood over. There's an 80-block rezoning that's going to take over a decade to complete, that will be taking place in Gowanus. We also have an issue with the promenade, where it's almost at a critical state of disrepair. So first of all, I don't know where these trucks are going, even if they were to make it to the BQE. We have too much construction, adaptation, retrofits, etc., going on here. And so that creates one problem. So I don't agree with Bex that it shouldn't go through Bay Street. It should absolutely stay on Bay Street. Bay Street is less trafficked, and also that is the existing truck route. I'm afraid that trucks will be using illegal routes through Red Hook. And we already had a kid killed in Red Hook several years ago by a sanitation truck that the parent had to chase down for months to figure out who killed her daughter. You know, and so I have a big issue with trucks coming anywhere near public housing. And so again, I work really close with groups like this group here. And a lot of times those with more connections in the group and with more expertise get their way. And the small people in public housing who can't grasp all of everything that's going on while living in a construction site usually get the burden. And I hope that doesn't happen in Red Hook. Number one, I hope it doesn't happen in New York City, because what you're doing is not only are the tax base members of New York City leaving and abandoning the city, but the poor folks are leaving too. So I don't want a promise of a job if we already know they cut down thousands of trees in Red Hook, and we will not be able to breathe out here with that amount of truck traffic. That's not a good trade-off to me. A few jobs. What happened with the fact that they were able to go and create special ordinances around hotels and storage facilities because they claim, oh, they only got 2 or 3 people working there. But then we let these things like Amazon and them come in and nobody said a thing. I'm honestly blaming that on our council member at this point. I don't know if Carlos is on here, but that was a bad move, Carlos. You should have told us immediately. As of right, it doesn't matter. The neighborhood should have known immediately about Amazon and the last mile trucking, because that's going to kill Red Hook. It's going to kill Red Hook. It's going to kill us physically, stress-wise. I can't take the noise now. With the rattling trucks going through the street in the middle of the night, the empty trucks are just as loud as the ones that are full. We don't have trees on Columbia Street and through the Red Hook campus to collect that PM 2.5, those small particle matters that are emitted from these trucks. We don't have the trees to collect that particle matter. And so we need to, my solution, enforce the rules. We need signage and we need enforcement. If we have to create a Red Hook community neighborhood watch, then that's what the hell we're gonna have to do to make sure that trucks stay where they belong and that they're not breaking the law, especially when you talk about how, low they're getting paid, how easily they could be replaced. That to me leads to low morale and decision-making by truck drivers when they're tired and they're coming from New Brunswick or somewhere else, and they finally get here, they're gonna cut every corner to get to that facility. And that's a big issue.
Yes.
So I just wanted to talk about that and about the emissions, the idling. We should be on their ass. No truck, I don't care if it's from Amazon. Don't just go after Amazon. Every truck. Nobody should be allowed to idle here unless they have the permission because they have some type of equipment that leads to them having to keep their trucks moving or on, like a concrete truck. But those other trucks, we should have some kind of sound device like the police use for to hear bullets, to hear emissions and sounds of trucks idling on our streets. Because without that, we're dead in Red Hook. Between the vermin and the trucks, I might leave Red Hook permanently because I don't see us being able to navigate it unless we build a movable bridge somewhere over there near Halleck, Quadrosi's spot, that some barges connected together. I like the Mike Stamatis idea of using these barges and things, but we have to expand on that idea and find a way for these trucks to leave Red Hook immediately using the back door. And that's all I'm gonna say about that.
Thank you, Karen. The chat was a flurry with agreement. And so thank you so much. So we're gonna move into our last section, the speaking portion. And I'm gonna start with Jenny Zhang from Assemblymember Marcela Metania's office. So Jenny, I'll pass it to you for some comments and then we'll move on from there.
Thank you so much, Karen and Catherine. So I am Jenny. I'm the Chief of Staff of Assemblymember Marcela Martinez's office. We took office early this year and have been getting up to speed on this issue. And honestly, the more we find out, the more alarming it becomes. I want to thank all the organizers that have been a part of this fight so far. We're going to need you to continue to organize, and we're going to need every single person on this call, whether this is the first time you're hearing about this issue or whether you've been in this fight for years, to become an organizer, because we want to win real changes. This is an issue that is not going away. As the world goes more online, as capital accumulates and accumulates more capital, economic and political power, we will only see the continued proliferation of such facilities and the continued discarding of low income and working class communities. It is no coincidence that this is happening in the backyard of NYCHA. And it's just been so alarming to see. For us, you know, we as an office, we're kind of new to the scene, but we are committed to addressing this issue. For us, this is a class issue. This is a race issue. It is about justice. And I'm really looking forward to the conversation where we can explore what the paths forward are. I know there's already been a lot of research and a lot of work done. I want to thank, you know, Jeremy and Allison and Beck for the research, the academic backup that we are going to need in this fight as we craft legislation, as we craft proposals. That is going to be incredibly necessary. I just want to say that, you know, listening to all the comments that have been made and listening to the research that has been done, it seems like this is kind of the modern permutation of the issue of waste equity, right? So for decades, 3/4 of the waste of New York City was concentrated in 3 low-income neighborhoods. The same is happening here, and it is coming to Red Hook. So how do we address it? We can look to approaches such as Bill de Blasio's in addressing waste equity. You know, it's a few decades too late, but they're starting to undo some of the harms now. So this comes in the form of actually reducing the amount of waste that is going into certain neighborhoods and trying to spread it out more. Can we learn from an approach like that while it is still early? I want to send, so this is a local law at the city level that was recently passed. Sorry, let me see if I can send it to everybody. That actually mandates, you know, 50% reductions of waste going into certain neighborhoods, 33% reductions of waste going to other neighborhoods. Can we fight for something similar here while it is still at the very beginning? For our office, you know, we're committed and we want to explore all the possible approaches, whether this is retroactive, you know, undoing, actually telling some of these facilities to leave and outlawing the amount of traffic that is going to be coming here, whether this is preventative. So we're talking about approaches like clean trucking, like using the waterways, you know, trying to mitigate some of the damage that we are expecting, or whether this is just about more public input. We need transparency, we need reporting. Our office had a conversation with UPS to try to understand a little bit more of what's happening. And, you know, their answer to us when we asked for numbers on truck volume, number of jobs, what is the pay of these jobs? Their answer to us was simply, you know, well, the plans haven't really been fully, you know, set in stone, so we can't tell you anything. They are not mandated to share anything with us. So is there something we can do to mandate that? Maybe the approach we need to take is a combination of all of the approaches above. You know, so I want to talk a little bit about just how we win something, whether it's a state level approach, whether it's a city level approach, whether it's a federal approach. So Marcella, who is our assembly member, comes from a movement organizing background. She was a part of the 2019 rent laws fight. And through just organizing her neighbors and organizing her peers, they were able to win the most pro-tenant rent laws in decades. Earlier this year at the state level, we fought for a historic budget, the biggest tax increase on high earners in recent memory, $4.3 billion in additional funding for public services. So we found that at the state level, at least, we can organize our way to victory. And that is kind of what is needed here. We need to organize across different communities, low-income communities of color. We win when we do the work. So, you know, we're here to say that we are willing to do the work. We are willing to research what legal approaches there are at the state level, whether this is environmental, whether it's zoning, whether it's whatever it might be. And we're just glad to be part of a 100-person call tonight. We're gonna need more and more 100 people calls like this in order to win. I hope we can rely on some of the research that's already been done. Jeremy and Allison and Bex, I wanna hit you up for, you know, your advice on kind of how you would go about regulating something like this. I'm sure this is something you've given thought to. So there's a lot of work to be done. We're starting to get up to speed on all of it. And just thank you for convening this very, very important and urgent discussion.
Thank you, Jenny. So I want to definitely get Q&A started by 7:30. I think people may be willing to stay a little bit later. hopefully. And so I'm going to pass it to Dan if you want to add anything, and then Samara and Eric from CB6.
Okay, sure. You know, I got the mayoral debate in one ear and you guys in the other. I wanted to point out, I don't know if anyone listened to WNYC this morning, the Brian Lair show. I asked Amazon, what do you call the fulfillment center in Staten Island? They said it's called JFK 8. And I Googled that, and yesterday I came across a New York Times expose about how Amazon is probably the worst employer there is by design, because Jeff Bezos basically wants to keep employees as short as possible so they don't end up asking for raises or further benefits. So there's a real high turnover that's by design. And Brian Lair actually interviewed the two New York Times reporters who went behind the scenes at the JFK 8 fulfillment center in Staten Island and highlighted some employees that were summarily dismissed, even though they had been good employees, because they did one mistake out of like 100 days of good work. So it kind of shows there's a labor side to this too. I also wanted to highlight that, like the past experience in Red Hook. I've worked for Congresswoman Velasquez for 20 years. And so I recall when IKEA was first looking to locate on the banks of the Gowanus Canal, after New Rochelle was able to get them to not locate in New Rochelle. And Bruce Ratner had, who of course developed Atlantic Yards, had acquired this motor pool site on the banks of the Gowanus Canal that's today Lowe's. And that was the first site IKEA looked to locate. And we organized, along with our elected colleagues and community groups, and Carolyn Ketchum and Brian Conheim of Community Consulting Services actually quantified the estimate of the full cost of traffic damages due to the proposed Brooklyn IKEA, put a number on it in terms of cost to businesses, residents, motorists, with the 10-mile radius. And IKEA basically pulled out. Bruce Ratner to this day is unhappy that we did that, but they would have needed a special permit to build there. So today you have Lowe's Home Improvement on that site, which is as of right. But they needed a special permit for Red Hook, but Red Hook was divided on IKEA because they had jobs they were offering. And so you had people for and against. We did a letter demanding a lot of things, but they really didn't have to do anything to please us because they will get some people supporting the jobs. I think Amazon is different in this case because the jobs aren't good. But I just wanted to point out that IKEA, despite that, actually has been a pretty good neighbor in that it did a waterborne freight study, although I haven't seen it. So I think we should demand that there be an update to a freight study, given all the new things and the new players we know, and the fact that Dove Hertz has a Staten Island location right across a salt marsh from the Amazon's fulfillment center, which, by the way, is much bigger than the last mile delivery center. So all the stuff gets consolidated in the Staten Island fulfillment center and then goes out to these local centers. There's two in Staten Island. So you got 2 or 3 that they're gonna have in Red Hook, et cetera. So they kind of emanate out from there. And also I'd point out that IKEA did, the community board did demand a bunch of things too in the ULERT process because they need a special permit. And so they did make good on making improvements to Red Hook, getting in and out of Red Hook, making safer turns, doing a ferry, doing shuttle service from subways, and implementing the traffic improvements that we take for granted today in 2005 that weren't that way before it opened. So I would just say that, that's like an example of, there is potential for trying to leverage as much as possible if you can't stop it. And if you can stop it, you would need levers to stop it because the as of right means they don't need a special permit and they don't need to go through ULERT. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. Lorena, I'm going to pass it to you. And then Community Board 6 has graciously said they don't need to speak. Thank you so much, Samara and Eric, for being here. And if you want to jump in after Lorena, you're welcome to, but also appreciate you all stepping back. And Lorena.
Hey everybody, I'm Lorena Lucero. I'm Carlos Menchaca's Chief of Staff. I'm sorry if this is repetitive, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew just some updates that we got when we did a walkthrough with the DOT commissioner about a week ago, I think, and Dan, maybe you talked about it. But I wanted to bring up a few things that came out of that meeting. It was an interagency meeting with DOB, Department of Buildings, Department of Transportation, EDC, and others. I can put the full list in the chat in a few seconds. Something that did come out of that and something that we raised, and this is to Karen's point, to Ms. Blondell's point, is that we did ask them to come and revisit Columbia Street. They were aware that there's like a no trucking sign that's supposed to be there. We told them again, yes, no, but nobody really follows that. Plus, there's a lot of trucks coming in because of construction. So they committed to coming back to Columbia Street to see if there was anything else that could be done, including possibly putting in a bump, like to slow down the trucks. But that was something that the commissioner agreed that he was going to send somebody over. So we're happy to sort of continue to follow up on that particular point. And then the biggest issue that we've had, and I know other offices have had with Amazon, is that, unlike UPS, when we were able to sort of find out what happened with UPS beforehand, we were able to give people the heads up. We're usually the last to know that Amazon is coming in, right? And as soon as then we're sort of scrambling to figure out like where they're coming, where they're going to go to. And that's some of the work that my colleague, who's no longer at the office, Renee Widdison, put together. And I think a map has been shared of some of that research, right? So that's like a struggle that we have as well, because we have to do the digging and finding out. Again, it's different parties, it's different people. So not everybody sort of is a good neighbor or sort of wants to be as proactive as at least UPS was at some point. And then the last thing that I'll say is that the last commitment that we got, and I know that Catherine is sort of organizing all of the notes that we're going to sort of take back, is that the DOT commissioner, which again has maybe 6 months, right? Until who knows who's going to be appointed. But another commitment that he made to us is that, he was basically like, we understand there's issues, but we will take ideas, right? And we're open to speaking to community members and take ideas that come from the community. So they would be open to that. And then the last thing I'll say is that we also received a commitment from them to have a follow-up meeting sometime in July, which is where we could present some of this information. And if there's very specific asks that could come from the community, we'll make them at that point. But I just wanted to add that. Now.
Awesome. Thank you, Lorena. Thank you for being here. And we're going to get into our Q&A. So again, shout out to CB6, who has been really supportive, Samara and Eric, thank you. Odalis, I'm going to let you speak and ask your question now. So you should see something on your screen that lets you unmute. And if you want to ask your question.
Yeah, I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay. So I actually asked multiple questions in the chat. But so my main question would be, what are okay, so there's not even going to be one warehouse. It's going to be 6, which I feel is a bit extreme, going that we already have a lot going on in Red Hook and a lot of stuff has been taken from us. So we don't really have any resources. And Amazon, I don't think they're going to provide us anything that we can use. So my question is, what are the benefits of having 6 warehouses around our neighborhood, being that it's really dangerous at that? That's kind of my main question. What are we getting out of it?
That's a great question, Odalis. Thank you. I'm seeing zeros. I'm seeing shaking heads it sounds like people agree with you, Odalis. Anyone want to speak to a benefit? I don't think anyone's going to speak to that, Odalis.
I will
Yeah,
say
so that's
what
what I mean.
the warehouses will say is a similar phrasing about providing jobs and rejuvenating the neighborhood. These are arguments that are often said, and I think, as we've said, it's highly flawed because there aren't any net gain of jobs, and it's giant concrete slabs don't really rejuvenate a neighborhood. But that's what you'll hear, and I think it's important to know what you'll hear. That way you can fight back against it and say, well, actually, they're crappy, low-paying jobs, or actually, it's not any more jobs than what was there before. But that's what you'll hear for sure. Are those two
It's also
arguments.
next day delivery. I think that's their message, is that like, oh, you want your stuff, right?
Mm.
Can I just chime in one idea on the jobs? So Red Hook started Red Hook on the Road about 30 years ago. Red Hook had a program that was started that helped people go from a regular driver's license to a CDL. Not only does that program still exist, we should be able to get the database from the Fifth Avenue Committee, which now houses that program, to make sure that every single person who in Red Hook who has a CDL is afforded an opportunity to work at that warehouse. Number one, I feel like they would be more concerned and adhere to the traffic route because it's their family members living here. And so I'm going to stop right there.
Thank you. Okay, so we had one more person that asked a question, John. Oh, I have to find you. Hold on, I have to unmute you. It's my first webinar. All right, so John, you could say your question, and then Tavina is going to move us into the Q&A questions after that.
Hi, Catherine, did you want a single question, or
If
may
you
I?
can do a single question, that will be great, but up to you. And you can also drop additional things in the chat.
I guess I can't really do a single question. Is there any way I could speak for 60 seconds?
60 seconds is great, yes. And introduce yourself too. I forgot to say that with Medallic.
I'm gonna start a timer. My name is John Santor. I live in Sunset Park. I'm just gonna say thank you to everybody who's here. Thank you to the information provided by the elected officials. It's very helpful, and I mean that sincerely. Thank you for all of these thoughts. I know it's extremely annoying when people you don't know show up and offer criticisms, especially backwards looking criticisms. But I have to say that this issue, unfortunately, is not new. I just went back and checked my records. The 640 Columbia Street site was reported in January of 2018. So this is an issue just on that one site that has been public knowledge for more than 3.5 years. I want to remind everybody that the largest site is UPS. It is not Amazon. And there was a July 2019 public meeting that Councilman Menchaca and Nydia Velasquez were at. I want to remind everybody that 75 New York City officials signed a letter asking Amazon to locate its second headquarters in New York City. That included Congresswoman Velasquez. It included Congressman Nadler. It included Eric Adams. Eric Adams wrote a letter calling for Brooklyn Prime, asking Amazon to come to Brooklyn for its second headquarters. I'm just bringing this up to say we can't have it both ways. If Amazon is a problem, then why are we begging them to come to New York City? So I just want to say we have to look back and we have to ask why this issue went on for years before it is now getting this attention in 2021. And I appreciate the work that people are doing on this now, but that's the last thing. And just please, everything needs to be laid out at this point. We're very late in the game. We're very late in the game here. So all options need to be on the table and need to be publicly accessible. And I'm happy to help in any way that I can. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Does anyone want to speak to that?
Yeah, well, I'll just say I'm not aware of the letter asking Amazon to have a headquarters here in what year, I don't know. I do know the Congressman Velasquez didn't support Amazon headquarters too in New York, and also we stepped up to actually challenge UPS, and I think through our efforts we were able to get some of the building saved. So as soon as we found out about it, we laid down the gauntlet to try to stop demolition of the Lidgerwood building. Now you have the pediment that's still there. I wish we could have saved more of the building. That's another problem where you don't have any landmarking in the neighborhood, any significant landmarking to protect buildings. So it gives you even less leverage. And the same goes for the SW Bound warehouse on Smith Street on the Gowanus Bay side of Red Hook. It was also torn down. And I know Councilman Menchaca tried to save that as well. So.
Thank you. We have a question from Noah. And Noah, I did allow you to talk, but I'll also just read your question. Are there any DOT plans for traffic mitigation and pedestrian safety, especially as it regards to adding new traffic lights on Van Brunt, Lorraine, and Bay? And then it says Eric would like to answer. So Eric, do you want to unmute and answer?
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. No, there are not any mitigation plans that we know of at this point. Just as background, Community Board 6 has asked now a number of times for a comprehensive truck study of Red Hook in light of all of the plans for last mile development going on, and have not yet gotten anything from DOT on that front. DOT is a very important player in this because while all of these projects are as of right, DOT does have some room to grant or not grant curb cuts for these facilities. So there is some leverage that the Department of Transportation has, and we hope that they will exercise it. But right now, there has not been any plan put forth for the kinds of mitigations that you asked about.
Did anyone else want to speak to that question?
Can I speak to it real quick? I just want to say, when it comes to, going to electric, we can't hear electric. We're so used to, when you talk about the character of a neighborhood, it's not just the sights, it's the sound. We are used to hearing their vehicles. When you go to electric, that creates another problem because they're very quiet. So, we have to deal with that issue. And also, let's be clear. I'm an older generation, so I'm used to going in a store. Generation Z does not go into bank and stores. They do Amazon shopping. And to top it off, the pandemic pushed more people into Amazon shopping. So it's like the phone. It's not going to go away. People are going to demand instant gratification because we like things quickly. So we need to enforce the rules around traffic. We really do. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim, did you want to add anything? I saw you put in the chat. No, okay.
Oh, I would just offer another thing just to build on what Lorena was saying of the DOT tour with Hank Gutman. A couple of things. I know he doesn't have a long tenure there, but I know that he's proactively spoken with the Freight NYC people. And I know that we have a Marine Highways support letter that Congressman Velasquez is doing to try to get infrastructure investments in what is called the Marine Highway to get more stuff moved by water. A lot of these places, as the good Columbia folks presented, are locating on industrial sites, which are waterfront sites in New York City, just because of the way the port grew the industry. So I think the waterborne is a key component. and EDC, Economic Development Corporation, has a Dock NYC request for expressions of interest on trying to develop more waterfront land for maritime use. I think that's key because, like, for instance, there's the 29th Street on the Sunset Park side. There's a basin there. There's plenty of waterfront property in Red Hook that that could be beefed up. And also SBIDC has a Brownfield Opportunity Area grant. And I know that one of the sites they're looking at is a warehouse on Erie Basin to see how could it be beefed up to do business using its water site along the Esplanade, where you have the barge port there. So I think there's opportunities, and we have to insist that companies that want to come in need to try to look at the local context and be part of solutions, as opposed to just impose more of these traffic, pedestrian safety, air quality, environmental justice burdens on the community.
Can I add on to that?
Yeah,
1
definitely.
minute?
And then we'll go on to Jackie's question after you're
Okay,
done.
so as Dan just mentioned, the EDC has their Dock NYC plan. So, I mean, one of the thoughts that we're pushing with Resilient Red Hook is to have the freight again, after it's leaving their warehouses, to be put on smaller boats. And New York City has 520 miles of waterfront property. So to take the freight, let's say out of an Amazon site that's at Richard Street, and put on a smaller boat and do a distribution throughout the city, again on water, bring it into these Dock NYC sites. They've also accumulated about 25 private sites, and they're trying to increase those private sites so that this way they would be able to deliver smaller containers or parcels, and then have them go the last mile delivery with either bicycles or electric scooters, maybe possibly have certain facilities that can accommodate this type of delivery system. And that would also be a way where we can get these thousands of Sprinter vans as they would be leaving to go do deliveries, to have them again do the deliveries via water throughout the 520 miles of New York City. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, so we have Jackie, and then Faith, and then Map Cook. And sorry if I'm missing people, just chat me because it's hard between the open and answered Q&A. But Jackie, you could go ahead.
Hey everyone, good evening. I'm so happy to see everyone from the community on this call. Thank you so much to RHI for organizing, and thank you everyone who gave the presentations. They were extremely informative. Looks like it took a lot of research, so thank you for doing that. Right before I ask my question, I do just want to mention that we're all in this together, and these warehouses really affect the entire neighborhood. Red Hook is such an organizing community, and we have strength in numbers. And, you know, again, we're at a point again where we're seeing corporations in the city take advantage of our public housing neighbors over and over again, historically so. And our community needs to be united now more than ever, you know, lace up our organizing shoes. And again, I'm just very inspired to see all different types of community members of Red Hook community on this call. And I want to just say that first, that being united is key in this issue. And to get onto my question, you know, I've definitely heard on this call that maybe we need this, maybe we can ask for this and that, but it's really time that we take back control and demand everything that our community needs, because of so much disinvestment in our neighborhood, losing our trees, toxic soil, and more than half of the neighborhood under horrific, dangerous construction. Really, enough is enough. I'm so disappointed that there was not more outreach about these last mile trucking facilities done, because even in COVID, our neighborhood organized every day. And this question is truly directed at the elected official offices on this call. And I really just want a straight up answer. If our community organizes, can we stop these warehouses? Can we shrink these warehouses in any way? And how can we support your offices in advocating for no warehouses? I'm just going to ask it. Maybe it's impossible, but I think it's on everyone's minds. Thank you so much.
I can maybe say something. So what I haven't heard yet, and maybe this is out there, but we're consumers, right? I think that there's a lot of power in us just not buying from Amazon. That's like separate and apart from the conversations that we're having. Well, I think that we could, but it's possible, it could be, I don't know, something local or something like that. I think, that is totally possible. And I think even to what, Dan said and the reports that are now people are talking about more in the way that Amazon is treating its workers, I think there's going to be an elevation of that. So that I think is something that hasn't been said, but I think could possibly happen. And I'm a dreamer. Let me just have my little dream. And then the last thing that I'll say is that I think, again, I think that people who live in the community know what's best, and especially some of the experts that were on this panel. And I think as far as your point, Jackie, of what could be helpful, I think it's just that, even what Karen pointed out, right? It's the local streets. It's like, what's going to work for us? And I think that and continuing to sort of put pressure on DOT, and even after we leave, right? Because we have 6 months, these conversations have to continue to remain memorialized and, continue to create a further plan to sort of, continue these conversations once we leave office. But that's all I'll say. But yeah, Jackie, the help is just that, the local input that has to come and the changes that have to come locally. And I know.
Thank you, Lorena. Does anyone else, Dan or
Yeah,
Jenny?
I'd love to jump in on, I'd love to jump in on that one. We've kind of seen throughout the course of this legislative session what it actually takes to win real changes and win the passing of laws, especially as, more far left, more radical legislators. And ultimately, what this takes is people power. So this comes from our experience organizing for Tax the Rich this year, from the Excluded Workers Fund, from Less is More, parole justice that recently passed last week. What we need is like a legislative hook. So some sort of law and design that we can push for in a united way, whether that's at the city level, whether that's at the state level. And then we need to organize the people like all of you here, to meet with and activate the constituents in every single district around New York State. So I'm talking about state level legislation here. The most effective way to get legislators to sign on to bills and to advocate for them is to have constituents from the district asking for meetings, aggressively asking for meetings until they co-sponsor. So that is what this type of thing will take. And I think we have the manpower on this call to do that, if that is something we're interested in. As far as state legislation goes, we're in the exploratory phase. There's a lot of policy conversations that need to happen as to what the design could be under state law. I think there's a few, city level interventions that seem interesting, the special permit, zoning text amendment changes. So that is kind of what this would take, if that's a fight that we're willing to take on.
Yeah, and if I could also just say, I understand people's looking hindsight, but, if you take UPS as example, when we're focused on UPS in May of 2019, as soon as we found out that they were doing demolition, it was UPS doing demolition because it wasn't clear who was doing demolition, until some smart people in the community, architects, figured out, hey, this address corresponds with the UPS headquarters. So then we knew who to reach out to. Then we wrote UPS, we called UPS, insisted they not demolish this building. And then, finally by July, we were able to get a concession, and they halted demolition and had conversations with the community on our insistence. I think in that case though, it was UPS, and UPS is actually kind of sensitive in its corporate profile. And so it doesn't look good to them if a Congress member and others are saying that they're screwing the community. So that actually leveraged them coming to the table and making some concessions. And to Carlos's credit too, worked proactively to say, well, can we do a traffic study with you and DOT? Can we do a study on waterborne deliveries, lower impacts and stuff like that? So we're on a roll in terms of getting something to happen there. But then UPS kind of turned around and said, oh, we're putting our site on the market. And then Amazon came in. And if you ask me, if you look at all the square footage, I think UPS kind of took a back seat and then let Amazon kind of come in and start to corner the market on some of that stuff. And Amazon, Jeff Bezos, I don't think has the same concern about his profile as we've seen in the news with the HQ2 stuff. And in the recent Times articles where his strategy is to fire workers as fast as possible so they don't demand too much in the way of benefits. So I think that is a challenge there. But I would also say on the council level, we should be, Carl's office, you could definitely share the package of city council legislation that would require special permits and engage local community folks like Jim and others who could find ways of quantifying so they couldn't find loopholes around the permits. It might be too little too late, but I think the package of bills at the city council should be shared, and people should be talking to people who are introducing those.
Great. Jackie, did you want to respond?
Yeah, great. Well, thank you for the answer, everyone. I don't think that there was a true straight up answer, but what I heard is that yes, we will organize. Yes, we will stop these from coming. And I believe that Assemblymember Martinez's office said that we can request a meeting. Well, this is the formal request of the meeting. I will be emailing you after this. We are ready to do this. Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you. Awesome. So I'm going to pass it to Faith, and then Samara, I'm going to let you explain your comment after Faith goes. So Faith, you could just introduce yourself and then ask your question.
Okay, so my name is Faith. I'm a public safety organizer at RHI. My question is, one of the main things that I've noticed during this meeting is that the nail is almost in the coffin with a lot of stuff that's going on in Red Hook with the warehouses. So in the future, my question would be how can we get Red Hook residents and NYCHA residents to be more and to know what's going on in Red Hook and what in order to get more
I think you froze at the very, very end, Faith, in order to get more involved?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Amazing question. It's a great point that a lot of people brought up. So I don't know if anyone wants to respond to it specifically, but I hear you, Faith, about it feels like, this is a very late in the game. So does someone on the panel want to kind of speak to that?
I'll speak to it. So Faith, one of the things is with the construction going on in the Red Hook houses, it's very disruptive. I spent 2 weeks, 2 weeks ago, my hearing was compromised for about 3 days just by the decibel of the noise in the building. And so when you're constantly having crisis and people are living through a pandemic, some want to go back to work, some are afraid to go back to work, people are just coming out. It's really hard to engage people until things hit a critical point like what's happening here. It's something that's, like you said, the nail is in the coffin. They're pretty much here. It's going to be hell and high water to get them out of here. They spent a lot of investment into their facilities. So again, we need to really start talking about who these targets are, who are the government targets, whether it's city, state, or federal, and holding them accountable with our votes. Because this is really unfair to have this much burden on the Red Hook community. We've been overburdened for a long time with air pollution. Bloomberg did a air pollution study that brought in shore power. And like every time we go through something like this, something else is put on us. So we need a comprehensive plan. Like maybe we need to do our 197A again, like we were floating, so that we can tell our electeds what we want and stop getting hit with all these surprises. And I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer for you, but people, this is a capitalistic country. They look at money. And so the more people consume, the more money the capitalists make. And so, you know, a lot of people really, really like using Amazon. So you could have 100 people here talking about let's boycott Amazon, and you'll have another 100 people that say, I love Amazon. It's just one of those things that falls in the middle. And so we have to deal with it and deal with it with our laws. And I'll stop there.
If I just to address the nail in the coffin, I think I just want to add, we definitely are at a critical point. I don't know though that this is the end, unfortunately. A lot of projections show even more, as unfathomable as that may be. So I think there should be action now, because projections are not showing a slowing. It's showing we have 6 planned till 2022, and maybe it'll be 10 or 12 in the next 4 or 5 years after that, which is almost unthinkable, but there is still space for them, and especially throughout other parts of the city. Additionally, I just want to say, like, not from a political point of view, but just like the tools that the government has, because I think it's important to talk about it, is you can go through the permitting, which is sort of before they're built, before they get the permit, that stops them from the future. But there are other tools that can be used as well, such as taxation and other measures that can sort of economically force them out once they're already there. So I think it's also important to consider those tools when you're planning action. And I think the community needs to have that discussion, since there are already so many, what the best path forward is. But to keep in mind that there's more than just permitting. There are some actions the government can take to retroactively affect businesses, whether that be through taxation, so it makes it unfavorable for them to stay, or they can be zoned out. I mean, there are more powerful measures the government can take, and it's important to keep that in mind. Obviously, the community needs to decide what measures are the best to take, but I think you should never give up hope, even if they're quote unquote already here. There's still a lot that can be done.
Thank you, Jeremy. That was great. Jim, did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, you know, regarding the nail in the coffin, what I think what we need to focus on at this point is how can we have basically live with these people in these warehouses at this point, and that's get them on, like we were saying, bring them down if we can to Halleck Street and have them go around so they're not going through Bay Street and through the parks and where all the kids are going to be playing, where we're going to have all of this extra pollution, have the trucks at the other point going through the Red Hook, you know, Atlantic Basin, and so bypass again Van Brunt Street, and this way it'll be least invasive on the neighborhood. And then also look for a water distribution plan. So again, we don't have all these trucks. Want to minimize trucks on our streets where all our people are going to be walking and living and breathing. So, I mean, this is what we need to focus on now. And then if we can, we were discussing the other night, some type of moratorium. I know it's difficult, so that this way, before anything else can come in, because like you said, we have 6 now, and we might be up to 10 by 2023. How do we stop additional, what extra restrictions can we put in place so that we don't have them come in and just take over the whole neighborhood and just, you know, do more damage? Thank you.
Thank you. And then I see you, Thad, if you want to respond. And then we have our next question from Matt Cook.
Sure. Yeah, just you know, Jim brought up the moratorium. So I do think that's an issue that should be explored. But And thanks, Jeremy, for bringing up the issue that there could be more warehouses in the future. And so permitting is still worth exploring. And this is a citywide issue. I think that's good city organizing we've been talking about, that we've got to connect with the folks in the South Bronx and in Queens who are also dealing with these issues, because there are citywide or state legislation that could help to address it. And then Karen's point earlier about enforcement, like permitting is one thing, but then enforcing laws, creating new laws to hold people to higher labor and environmental standards, and then enforcing those laws, but just enforcing the truck routes. But the moratorium thing should really be figured out, because that could maybe buy some time. It's really challenging, I think, but it could maybe buy some time, at least for Red Hook, to do a full traffic study to actually figure out where these trucks ought to go. Lots of interesting ideas here, and whether maritime can be part of the equation. But when, and this goes back to Faith's question, like, to have to deal with all this after the fact is really, we should take a lesson here that, we shouldn't just be reactive here. Red Hook's got to figure out its own future. And so Allison mentioned in the chat that the Resilient Red Hook folks have been working on a plan. The pandemic happened, but maybe it's time to get serious about, using this forum that Catherine created tonight, which was amazing to see all these people here, and really trying to have a robust conversation about some of these issues before they come down, before it's after the fact. Thanks.
Thank you, Thad. Faith, I just want to give you the opportunity to respond to anyone that spoke, or you can pass. Up to you.
No, I don't have anything to say. Thank you.
Okay, great question. Thank you. Samara, did you want to jump in before the next question?
Sorry, I just wanted to confirm my facts. It is indeed, yes. So the person that we've been speaking to, I think that a couple folks have been speaking to at Amazon is indeed Chuck Schumer's daughter, Jessica Schumer. I'm not trying to start any like rumors that aren't true, but that is true. Yeah.
Thank you, Samara. Just drop the mic with that. And so we have.
And I will just say that I transparently put her name in some emails I sent to many people, as many people as I could, on this panel and others.
You did.
And also point out that she was the executive director of the Friends of the BQX, which is an ill-fated project, hopefully. But I think Andrea Sansome raised a good point in some email chains about, well, these Amazon sites are locating on Beard Street. This actually is supposed to be part of some flood protection that we have yet to see built. And then how is that going to work when you're building flood protection where trucks are supposed to be coming in and out? So I think not only is the BQX a huge boondoggle of how flood protection will work with everything else going on, this is also how are you locating in a flood zone, that has to be built up with multiple things going on. So I think Resilient Red Hook being involved is also, they can bring a lens to that as well.
That's exactly the point, is that trucks are going to trash the infrastructure, the street infrastructure and everything that's in the subsurface. So we need to get a commitment from folks who are using those trucks that they're willing to maintain the public infrastructure that they're using and using at a much higher rate than anyone else in the neighborhood.
Great point, Hildegard. But I can say that there will be a presentation soon from the Coastal Resiliency Partners. And I did see something recently that showed, and I asked the same question, that it will not interfere with their putting in any devices or parts in Beard Street.
What I'm speaking of is subsurface stuff.
Yeah.
So with all those trucks driving over those streets, the sewers are going to be crushed.
Yeah.
The sewers that are not already crushed will be crushed.
Right.
Well, also Karen, could you clarify, because there's a difference between the interim flood protections, which are tiger dams and, these temporary things, but then there's there's the longer term flood protections that have to do with raising the street grade and stuff like that.
Yeah, so the grade is gonna be raised over in that area. And I did ask how would that work with the construction and the trucking that's there? And they said that it would not compromise the raising of the streets or the process won't be, they won't be in conflict, even though that'll be going on in the next 18 months or so.
Well, yeah, well, okay. I'd like to understand how that isn't in conflict. You have trucks coming and going in construction to raise streets where you have to cross them.
I want to move into our next question because it's related. I'm so sorry. Okay, but Map Cook asked, and I don't know if you want to unmute. Trying to find your question. Is there a plan for flood impact study due to the locations of the warehouses? Very related, and Jenny answered. I don't know if Jenny, you wanted to speak to that, or if Map, you wanted to say anything else.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Map, if you're talking about, you know, how does the presence of these facilities change the flood risk for Red Hook? Maybe that's what you're getting at, but there is already, you know, maps showing flood risk zones, and all of these facilities are in Hurricane Zone 1, the most prone to flood risk. And, you know, there's an argument to say that any land in these zones should be used for resiliency. It should be used to create barriers such that it doesn't, you know, any rising sea levels don't actually affect the residential community behind it. So I don't know if that's something we can work into our argument, but it could be very compelling.
My question is because I remember when 2 trees came in next to IKEA and they leveled off that land, there was some discussion, I believe, and there was, I believe, some investigations done as to whether or not that actually precipitated even the greater flooding that we saw on Beard Street. And so my question then, in terms of flood study, is about the fact that as you have these new warehouses being constructed, and lands that would have been able to, and maybe even services that would have been able to accommodate some of the waters coming in, that will change when suddenly spaces will be filled up with concrete and things like that. So that was one of my reasons for asking that question about flooding. Can I just say 2 things, other things? And thank you to everyone. I really have enjoyed this. And I hope Red Hook Initiative, if possible, you can save the chat because there's so many important links that were included. So thank you for that. Just a couple of things about Halleck Street. So I am actually, even though it says MapCalc, this is Marlene Panton, and I'm the person who helps lead Red Hook Conservancy. And in the community, we work to bring volunteers and recruit volunteers to help maintain the parks and the ball fields and such. But I'm also on the CB6 Parks Committee. I don't know if Glenn is on the call. He's the chair, but just to you to know, because I've seen some questions about Halleck Street, and we have had that discussion with Parks multiple times. That space belongs to DOT, and DOT has been reluctant to turn it over. And additionally, Parks has made it clear that they would not touch that space unless the monies was already allocated for it, because it will require significant remediation in order for that to be used. The Parks Committee had been asking for it to be included as part of Ballfield 6. And we actually had that discussion again, I think 2 or 3 months ago. And again, Parks Department made it clear they would not touch that unless there's a lot of funds, but also they would have to go to DOT. So this has been an ongoing issue for years that we've brought up. And then just in terms of, I really appreciate Karen mentioning NYCHA and the trees. I have had this discussion because we're into supporting green spaces. I have brought this up and I've actually had discussions with Melissa at Velasquez's office, because one of my concerns is, and I've said this before, is that with what experience I have with street trees, we help care for street trees in Red Hook as well, and working with the Parks Department on those things. One of the things I'm still asking is the trees have been cut down, and many of the trees that were cut down at NYCHA are old, mature trees, which has taken decades to get to that point. And so now you suddenly are going to be replanting young trees. Traditionally, maybe 50% of those trees will not make it in the first 2 or 3 years. Has NYCHA allocated money for continuous replanting, and have they allocated money for maintenance? Because if they haven't done that and they simply provide money for just the initial planting, the folks in Red Hook will be dealing with significant air pollution from the trucks, but also the fact that they will likely take a long time before they see mature trees on NYCHA. So that's an issue we have actually asked. It's not our place to speak to NYCHA or anything, and we wouldn't think to do that, but it is something still I keep raising because I do think it's an important issue that needs to be addressed long before NYCHA ever gets to the point of replanting. And then lastly, just to say that we've talked about communications, right? And how do we find out? I really appreciated Faith's question. And so one of the things I have brought up in the past is that, is it possible in Red Hook to get some of those Link NYC boards put in Red Hook, similar to what you have on Court Street in Carroll Gardens? Because at least then folks can see and read what's happening in the community. You can share information more easily. And I've always wondered, I've asked, is it possible? I don't know if any of the elected officials have ever looked into that. Would the water table impact something like that? The point is made that those usually can go in places where there used to be public telephone booths. But I do think that's one way to share information and to be able to connect in the community much more easily. So I just wanted to also mention that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. And Nicholas has been waiting to ask their question, but is anyone going to respond to what was brought up?
Catherine, if I could just really quickly answer the Link NYC question before Nicholas asks his question. Our understanding at CB6 is that there's an issue with the way the electricity is delivered to Red Hook. It's by overhead wire instead of underground, and that's been a problem for Link NYC. There was a presentation to the community board about 3 years ago, and if you give me your email in the chat, I'll see if I can dig that up and send it to you.
Eric, the Red Hook houses has underground wiring. So you're talking about half of Red Hook has overhead.
Yeah,
but that doesn't, I mean, we still need Link NYC over here.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I'm not saying that you don't. It's just, I know that when they presented the plan for CB6 to us, that was what they were telling us.
Okay, so now we want at least half of them.
So Karen, I just also want to quickly mention that I had actually suggested at the time Link NYC for the Red Hook Red Hook houses, the mall, so that you can have one maybe at the Court Street entrance, and you have one in the middle of the mall, and then you have one closer to Coffee Park or something like that, even if you can't have it on the street. Because I think there's still an opportunity to do that. And I think it's just a way for us to get information out to the community. It makes it, we see how helpful it is here over in Carroll Gardens. And I think Red Hook should have that. And if not, then they need to come up with new ideas and ways to provide that kind of technology in the community. There's no reason why it can't be, something can't be done.
Okay, so I'm gonna let Nicholas unmute and ask your question. And then that sounds like something definitely to follow up on at the community board level and potentially in other spaces. Thank you so much for bringing those issues up.
So I very much appreciate you guys allowing me to speak tonight. I actually sit on Community Board 7, slightly to the south of Red Hook. And if you'll permit me, I'd like to make one very brief comment and then ask my question. You know, if you want to see, you know, essentially what happens when you have an overabundance of trucking and an insufficient amount of roadway and an insufficient amount of safety, look no further than Sunset Park. You know, we've been fighting these issues for a long time, and I believe that we've had a couple of joint meetings with CB6, and I applaud you guys for holding these meetings because it is very important to bring these issues to the fore, to discuss them, and then also to try to come up with ways of mitigating their effects. Unfortunately, a number of these warehouses that are already in construction are going to be built, and there's little that we can do about them at this moment. And so The second half of this would really be looking at legislation that you could potentially make it so that those businesses would be maybe, less favorable in those locations, or looking at some of the other environmental effects that are caused by those particular structures there. As to my knowledge, there's nothing in zoning, building code, or anything else that you could potentially use to not allow them currently. So really my question though boils down to the elected leaders, and principally so, to our council member who shares also Sunset Park, but also to our federal legislator. One is, the DOT has been historically, disregarding or really just, not caring about R2 districts. And then secondly, if the Congresswoman really wanted to put a kibosh on something, she can do it. And I just want to know what it'll take to get the undivided attention of our Congresswoman and also Congress member Nadler as well. John, we hear you.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to let panelists respond to that, and then we're going to wrap up. Because as I said in the chat, shout out to our interpreters. They've been talking this whole time, Viviana and C, so we want to let them rest their voices. But did anyone want to respond to Nicholas?
Sure. Well, I start out by saying you do have our undivided attention. I think, though, community organizing meetings like this and getting more follow-up with folks involved with both community boards, my associate Melissa DeValle-Ortiz, who was mentioned, is actually at your Community Board 7 meeting right now. So we're ready to be engaged. And we've done fights before. I don't think, though, because you're a congresswoman, you're all powerful. It doesn't make, you're not a queen. So you can't just tell people, you do this, you do that, right? But her power derives from the community being unified, I think. And so I think the more you organize, the better. So, I will say that we've been proactive in reaching out to DOT. We set together a meeting with Carlos's office and the DOT Commissioner, Polly Trottenberg, to try to get them to start the transportation study, even though UPS was kind of pulling out. What happened was, well, first DOT had people lower down had been saying, well, we're not going to do it until we finish the smart truck study. Well, the smart truck study is finished now. Was after we got some commitment from Polly Trottenberg, she left DOT, and now she's in with federal DOT. Hank Gutman is now head of DOT, so we've engaged him. He's ready to meet next in a couple of weeks for us to follow up. So they think the more people can be clear on what our asks and demands are of the agencies, the better for us to be able to leverage. But I will say that Hank is also, he's not there forever because there's going to be a new mayor, of course, but Hank is head of the Brooklyn Navy Yard Development Corporation, has a real eye to freight, was also part of the expert panel on the BQE and advocating for the solution to the triple cantilever in Brooklyn Heights, not to be a one-off, but there has to be a quarter-wide solution to the crumbling Brooklyn Queens Expressway and Gowanus Expressway. So look at Williamsburg to the north and look at Gowanus Expressway through Sunset Park to the south and have a bigger approach that deals with the bigger problem of freight and this highway. So I do think we do have a good ally there while he's there. And also I talked to Denise, who did the smart truck study, and they're already starting to do more traffic counts and truck counts, which they did a little bit in their smart truck study, but we're on them to try to do more, to have baselines to be able to do stuff with us here. But enforcement is also key. And so we have to have a multi-pronged approach. So you have our undivided attention.
Thank you, Dan. Anyone else want to respond, or anyone have final words before we log off? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to everyone. Thank you to our 71 people who stuck it out until 8:18. And special shout out to our interpreters. You all are amazing. Viviana, C, we really appreciate you. So I'm saving the chat right now, and I will send it out to everyone who signed in, and we'll also post the YouTube link of the full meeting on our website. And we look forward to continuing to engage, finding more ways to engage than webinar, because I wish I could have seen all your faces in person. come by Open Streets tomorrow, 12 to 5 at RHI. And thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Now I'm gonna have to look at the debate on tape.
Good night, everyone.
I gotta get out of RHI. I'm afraid I'm locked in here. Bye,
Thanks, Kat.
everybody.
Good night.
Yeah, get out of there. Get out of there safe.